Let the humans speak if it must. We'll decide what matters once we hear how Earth defines relevance. General Corvullen's voice rolled across the chamber like gravel ground beneath steel. His armored gauntlet flexed against the armrest, each digit clicking in sequence as he leaned forward closer to the dais where the Terran representative now stood. Varen Thos didn't move. He hadn't flinched when the Thrix contingent arrived with war medals stitched into living cloth. He didn't react when Vullen's entourage displayed siege footage of planetary conquests on their chestplate projectors, and he didn't smile now as murmurs slithered through the 97 delegations watching from their tiers. Instead, he turned slightly, just enough for the summit's primary laser display to register his identity. Terran Archive Authority, Protocol Executor, Memory Sovereignty Division. No titles, no rank, only truth. Earth is not here to impress you, General, Varen said, his tone quieter than the ambient drone of surveillance lenses overhead. We are here because your voice touched something sacred, and that cannot go unanswered. A sudden shift, almost imperceptible, passed through the gallery. The council chamber, cut from volcanic glass and threaded with embassy colors, seemed to stiffen in its silence. Not from offense, but anticipation. Vullen sneered, rising from his post. Sacred, we spoke of strength. You sent a record keeper. Shall we expect poetry next? Perhaps an elegy for Earth's misplaced pride. Varen stepped forward, not rushing, not retreating, simply existing with such anchored stillness that it unnerved. His eyes, unreadable beneath the flicker of rotating summit seals, didn't even acknowledge Vullen's taunt. What was once written, he said calmly, can also be unwritten. The air inside the chamber felt sharper now, not cold, but surgically exact. Somewhere behind the council tiers, a diplomatic aide adjusted his throat implant and froze as his interface dimmed. A secondary relay, previously broadcasting real-time ambassadorial transcripts to 4 neutral sectors, blinked and displayed only 2 words. Memory request acknowledged. On a raised platform to Varen's right, a group of metallic-banded Terran observers said nothing. Among them, Tarn Volek, Earth's ledger relay specialist, scanned his data slate, its display scrolling with validation pings from deep node anchor points buried across star sectors. Each ping sent a flicker of silent compliance through Earth's interwoven truth architecture. One word, readiness. Varen raised his palm, not in threat, not in warning, as if touching something no one else could see. General Vullen, he said, voice like flint scraping time itself. Do you recall what your empire signed in the year 2481 during the Accord of Vel Tarn? Vullen blinked, only slightly, but Varen saw it. A minor clause, the Threx general replied. Subaccords, binding only in peace, surely not relevant. Jurin Delk, seated behind Varen, spoke for the first time. His voice was lean, with no wasted syllables. Subsection 4, Cultural Memory Clause. Authorization granted to Earth's Archive Division to maintain redundancy records of participating civilizations for diplomatic stabilization purposes. Void in war. Vullen snapped. No, Delk corrected. Void in declared war, not in diplomatic threat. A ripple passed through the hall, not visually, but within the logic streams of every attending system. Delegates' eyes flicked to their respective display lenses. Neutral liaisons ran quiet verifications. No objections rose, because the clause was real, and it was binding. On the chamber's inner ring, an older Threx advisor leaned toward Vullen and whispered urgently. Vullen's face contorted, not with fear, but with something stranger, recognition. Varen's fingers moved, typing nothing, but activating everything. The laser display at the center of the chamber shimmered once, then flashed the words, Directive Corin Vale, prepared. Awaiting validation. I suggest, Varen said, now fully facing the council, that those present take note of this moment. What follows is not war, not conflict, but redress, through sanctioned revocation. Vullen looked to the gallery. He expected solidarity. He received distance. No delegate offered gaze, let alone support. A silence unlike any before settled into the room, an engineered, weight-bearing void, like the pause before a verdict. I have fielded fleets across dying stars, Vullen muttered, quieter now. I've led reclamation against ferals and ghosts. Yet you, what are you? A librarian? No, Varen answered. I am the consequence of your forgetfulness. Somewhere deep within Earth's archive shell beneath Zurith Prime, A buried chrono key rotated into final position. Across distant satellites, Earth's quantum nodes pulsed once, bright enough to be noticed, brief enough to remain unchallenged. Kor Vulin opened his mouth, but his diplomatic badge, laser inscribed with Threk's heritage markers, flickered and dimmed. Status, identity pending verification. He slapped it with the back of his gauntlet. It didn't react, and in that small, strange blink of disconnection, the balance shifted, from arrogance to audit, from power to protocol. Varen turned to face the crowd, not with pride, nor triumph, just the gravity of a man who understood what came next. Earth requires no armies, he said quietly, only memory. And with a final tap on his display, the directive's activation confirmed, without flourish, without drama. Just a quiet, absolute, directive Corin Vale, executed. You didn't just threaten a diplomat, Joran Delk murmured, tapping his stylus against the data plate. You challenged Earth's authorship of memory. The words weren't addressed to anyone in particular, just an observation suspended in air dry as the stale filtered oxygen circulating the archive chamber beneath Zurith Prime. Around him, the archive authorities' inner sanctum pulsed with controlled rhythm, rows of quartz-paned data ledgers, each lit from within, casting subtle refractions on the obsidian floor. The temperature held steady, engineered for optimal preservation of neural crystal, not warmth, not comfort, just function. Tarn Volek adjusted his collar without looking up. His gaze was pinned to the heads-up display embedded in the central analysis slate, where lines of legal code scrolled with machine precision. The signature trail they were chasing lay buried between forgotten subclauses and auto-sealed diplomatic frameworks. Clause 17, he said, buried under the Accord of Veltarn. Category, Continuity Safeguard. Confirmed origin date, May 12, 2481. Threk's Dominion Delegation. Authenticated by 3 system witnesses, 1 neutral signatory, and a second-tier culture trust review. Delk exhaled through his nose. Then it holds. In the chamber's far wall, the memory chain keys rotated slowly behind crystalline security shields. Each was encoded with fragments of long-term civilization truth, rotational glyphs that glowed when queried and darkened when locked. One of them blinked now, amber then silver, then void. Tarn didn't need to check which one it was. It's live. Outside, diplomatic broadcasts were still transmitting the final line from Varan Thos. That statement, cold, measured, irreversible, had already triggered a ripple through neural relay stations orbiting 12 neutral systems. Truth is the last line. The echo from the summit chamber played once more. Joran moved to the laser plasma console and ran a delta path through the treaty history validator. The heads-up display layered over the treaty's legal core like a surgeon's lens dissecting a bloodless wound. Protocol read null, pending activation. Condition met. Diplomatic threat against sovereign representative. Clause 17 match. Earth authorized historical stewardship. There it was, still intact, still binding. Why didn't they nullify it? Tarn asked. The Threks could have rescinded participation in the memory stewardship years ago. Joran's eyes didn't leave the display, because they forgot they agreed to it. A silence pooled between them, but not the heavy kind. This one carried weight only for those who understood the value of legal continuity, the framework upon which civilizations kept their stories stitched together. Without those threads, even power collapsed. You're cleared to rote ledger verification, Delk said. Tarn reached for the clause chip, the physical key embedded with the directive's encoded history. Its surface shimmered, not with light, but with embedded microdata reacting to skin temperature. He aligned it into the input slot. The chamber dimmed by half. System nodes blinked in staggered rhythm. Clause 17. Identity hash validated memory anchor. Threk's Dominion historic ledger status, stable. Integrity =sign 99.998%. The heads-up display fractured for a moment. Flashes of treaties, mission logs, education protocols, historical birthright charts, all of it floating in snapshot fragments for an instant before the system recompiled into a singular authorization prompt. Executor key, Joran said. Tarn tapped the slate's corner, activating biometric recognition. His retinal scan passed in 1.7 seconds. Voice match followed. Name Tarn Volek. Role Relay Controller. Sovereign Archive Systems directive match found. Corin Vale execute. He didn't hit confirm. Not yet. Instead, he turned toward Delk, who was already entering a mirror sequence on the opposing console. Redundancy was law, even Earth followed it. This still feels heavier than deletion, Tarn said, voice low. This isn't erasing data, it's revoking authorship. Delk's jaw moved slightly, as if considering whether to respond. Eventually he did. History isn't memory, Tarn. History is what we agree to remember, and the Threks, by their own words, just voided their agreement. A moment later, the console chimed. Dual path confirmation acquired. Tarn inserted the clause chip fully. The light above the chamber's central pillar dimmed, then shifted to an indigo hue, reserved only for high-tier cultural erasures. On the external diplomatic line, silence held, no interjections, no opposition, no challenges from the council, because legality was now unbreakable. Joran leaned forward, voice cold and certain. Enter the activation key. Tarn moved his hand over the keyboard, not typing words but symbols, 3 glyphs, each one uniquely shaped by Earth's arcane treaty dialect. Koran, Veil, Lock. The screen pulsed. Across 7 archive satellites, Earth's ledger executors aligned. Data echo streams redirected. Quantum anchors activated. Directive Koran Veil, authorized. One breath, then another. Status, Delk asked. Tarn stared at the display. Clause activated. Beginning rollback. Outside the chamber, Earth's presence remained quiet. Varen would still be standing inside the summit chamber, his face unreadable, but now, his silence carried a verdict. What happens first? Tarn asked. Joran tapped the memory chain display. Where the Threks anchor had gone dark, they lose time, and in a few seconds, the Threks would begin to forget the very framework that once justified their place in the galaxy, not through war, but through law, through memory, and through Earth's unblinking guardianship of what remains true. It's not just vanishing, it's unraveling, Zavrik Pell whispered, eyes flicking between heads-up displays as if one might hold steady long enough to explain the others. The Council Annex aboard the Avenel Spire, a neutral orbit station positioned between disputed trade zones, had once pulsed with diplomatic routine, amber lights following curved walkways, airflow systems calibrated to mimic the sensation of a homeworld breeze. Now it buzzed with nothing. No alerts, no sound, just a stillness engineered by failure. The console nearest to him had reset for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Where once it logged tax ledgers, charter oaths and historical permissions granted to the Threks Dominion, it now projected only a black screen etched with one phrase in Terran legal dialect. Source entity, undefined. Zavrik leaned forward, the tips of his fingers brushing the screen's rim. Not cold, not warm, just present. The system shouldn't have been able to forget. He turned his wrist, activating his private treaty monitor node. The query returned blank, but not broken, empty by design. He watched, jaw rigid, as clause chains failed to resolve. Each node snapped silently, unlit glyphs tumbling into void fields that had once verified Threks Dominion claims. Impossible, he muttered. Even war doesn't cut this deep. Across the spiral-linked worlds of the Threks core, things were already worse. Timestamp +00142 location. Indarari Core Nexus, Threks Education Server Complex. A teaching AI flickered once, then shut down mid-lecture. Students stared as its words dissolved into static glyphs. Classroom walls, once adorned with animated timelines of conquest and legacy, rebooted into blank white panels. One child raised his hand. Where is our founder's path? No one answered. The instructors checked their archive nodes. Every origin tale now showed a red lock. Cultural source, not verified. Timestamp +00311 location. Threks Senate Annex. Jurin Solemn District Senator Varak slammed his palm into the table's command surface. Run it again. It's a system delay, not an erasure. The room pulsed red. Every data node routed to the archive network returned the same code, chronosovereign grid exception. Timeline entry denied. Aides scrambled to manually access colonial logs. Nothing parsed. Colonization records for half of their outer rim holdings were missing entry stamps. We can't verify origin, someone whispered. Then we don't own them, another realized. The room fell into an uneasy quiet, broken only by one intern muttering a line that would later circulate across surviving data bursts. The stars still shine, but no one remembers who lit them. Timestamp +00549 location. Deltra Morn, Threx Military Cartographic Bureau map technician Sorik Ilian opened his orbital star chart generator. It blinked, then folded in on itself. Lines of territorial control stuttered, broke apart, and then disappeared. The render didn't glitch, it deleted, systematically. One moment, he watched the spiral arms of Threx influence pulse across sector maps like webbed veins. The next, nothing remained but neutral gray. His supervisor said nothing, just stared at the blank canvas, where 1,000 years of expansion had once lived. This isn't destruction, Sorik said. This is revocation. Timestamp plus 00723 location. Darlock Gate Traffic Core. Commerce Relay Node incoming vessels pinged for authorization codes. The Gate AI responded. Entity authority. Non-recognized. Historical clearance. Absent. Request rejected. The lead merchant ship turned slowly, uncertainly, engines throttling to minimum as confusion overtook urgency. Dozens of other vessels hovered nearby, none moving, none speaking. Just a web of stalled lives suspended in the middle of a system that no longer acknowledged who they were. One trade captain deactivated his interface. If we aren't Threx, he said aloud, what are we? Timestamp plus 00855 location. Outer Ring Consular Repository. Zavrik Pell's station. Pell pulled up the core delegation list. The heads-up display twitched once, then stuttered as entire lines of credentials blanked out. General Kor Volin, Archivist Merrick Doss, Commander Lurn Thess. One by one, their profiles dimmed into null frames. Their galactic designations faded until only a placeholder remained. Recognition, obsolete cultural status, deprecated memory anchor. Terminated. Pell swallowed. Not fear, not awe, something worse. He looked up. Outside the viewing bay, space drifted as it always had, calm, wide, unbothered. But somewhere behind that stillness, something fundamental had been untethered. He reached for his log, for protocol, for anything. Council report, he dictated, voice low. Cross-galactic verification streams confirm directive core and veil active. Results not theoretical. Immediate, comprehensive. Threx history nodes are absent. Their cultural ledger is unlocatable. He paused. No, not lost. He corrected himself slowly. They've been removed. Timestamp plus 0010 o'clock location. Everywhere directive core and veil execution phase complete status. Irreversible Threx dominion. Historical recognition. Terminated Earth didn't announce it. No speech, no projection, no spectacle, only systems obeying law, only silence, and the creeping realization that history once revoked leaves nothing to grieve. No, Merrick Doss said aloud before the terminal finished its response. That entry was locked under neural seal. Try again. Use the root verification channel. Command input acknowledged. Request failed. Record entity not located. The words burned into the laser plasma display, pale white on a shifting field of archival blue. Merrick blinked twice, forcing his tired eyes to stay focused. A second request. Same result. This wasn't a glitch. He stepped back from the command pedestal and scanned the rows of memory wells embedded along the floor. Each well linked to Threx's core historical lattice, now flickered inconsistently. Glyphs hovered above them, trying to resolve. Names, dates, lineages. Gone. Velen Sector Founding Charter, Subsector B, he ordered. Primary Entry Protocol. The system paused, then produced static code. No names, no timestamp, no planetary log of first contact, no census of settlers. Entry chain, incomplete. Fragment source, absent. Merrick clenched his jaw and turned to the nearest assistant, a junior archivist named Rival. The boy couldn't have been more than 40 cycles old, barely seasoned, but competent. Now he looked like someone who'd just witnessed a planet die. Did you override the ledger loop? Rival didn't answer. His pupils were dilated. One hand hovered just inches from his own terminal, as if touching it again might erase more. It's deleting itself, the boy whispered. It's not being hacked. The records aren't just missing, they're being disallowed. Merrick strode across the chamber to the primary vault housing the foundational ledgers. The light around it had shifted from recognition green to dormant amber. He didn't need a systems engineer to tell him that meant auto-lock disengaged. He pressed his thumb against the glass pad, and waited for retinal sync. Access granted. Lead archivist. Merrick DOS query archive ID. Personal lineage. He had to know. If it was a mistake, it would end here. The system wouldn't fail on this. Result: lineage entity not recognized status, unverified origin. His name, the name of his father, his grandmother, all grayed out. Merrick's knees faltered, not from pain, from the sheer vertigo of absence. They hadn't deleted a record. They'd erased the reason that record was allowed to exist. The archive room shifted around him, not physically, but in weight. The silence didn't deepen. It thickened, like air compressing in a sealed chamber. Every breath he drew tasted stale, even as the filtration system continued its dutiful hum. He looked around. Not one data slate held a readable name. The founding chronicles of the Dominion, once layered in translucent glyphs, now displayed only motionless icons, a broken ring, an open ledger with no script, a blinking dot that never resolved. Merrick pressed both hands against the vault wall. How far does this reach? Query detected. Response: full cultural lattice disconnection confirmed. Memory steward, Earth Archive Authority. So it was true, not a rumor, not a bluff, whispered in foreign council chambers. Earth had done it, activated the directive, and he had no weapon to stop it. Show me combat archives, he demanded. The display blinked. No record found. Threx campaigns against Viscari, circa 2702. No record found. Zarek border conflict. No record found. Victory at Merrick Spire. Merrick stumbled back, one hand bracing against the cool alloy of the archive desk. He scanned his surroundings. Reval had collapsed into his chair. One of the other assistants was muttering to himself, typing commands into a dead console like muscle memory kept running even after the mind gave up. Merrick stared at the ceiling, where old flags of conquest were projected on rotating beams. Now those beams spun aimlessly, casting flickering shadows instead of emblems. The war banners didn't even know what they celebrated. His mind raced. What was the last thing he'd backed up to the hard ledgers? Could he isolate one record untouched by the Earth grid? Was there an edge case, an unindexed treaty clause, that might void the effect? He moved to the micro-core buffer, a tiny outdated node never integrated with the main archive servers. It had been used once, decades ago, to hold a migration log during a data overflow. He typed manually, each key echoing like it was trying to escape the building. Entry ID, 491B Zeltran lock loading, a single frame rendered. A colony ship arrival log from a minor moon orbiting Rekoth. The date flickered, then vanished. Anchor not validated. Memory path not approved. He stood completely still. Even the backups were being rewritten. Not wiped, not broken, just denied. That's when he noticed the reflection in the glass of the vault wall. His face, aged but familiar, and beneath his name tag, a blinking icon, unverified lineage. No rank, no past. Merrick backed away from the terminal, suddenly unsure of where he belonged in a building designed to remember. Reval, he called softly. The boy didn't respond. Reval, what was your grandfather's name? A pause. I don't. The boy's mouth twitched, eyes widening. Why can't I? Merrick grabbed him by the shoulders. Listen to me. Focus. What was your family's designation block? Which archive was it stored in? Reval blinked rapidly. Sector. Darnak. No Varen? Wait. His voice cracked. Merrick stepped back and looked out the high glass panel lining the far wall. The Dominion's capital skyline, once a triumph of tiered architecture and data-linked spires, now shimmered, half of its locator grid gone dark. He whispered to himself. They didn't delete our story. They unpinned it from the world. System alert. Archive session closed. Entity classification deprecated. Merrick Doss, last known lead archivist of the Threx Dominion, stood alone in the Hall of Records, as the concept of his civilization faded, not through conquest, but through erasure, and behind him, every light in the archive chamber dimmed, not with violence, but with certainty. They're asking what planet we're from, said Uriksen, staring blankly at the registrar console. And I can't give them an answer. His voice sounded brittle, like it had passed through too many filters, and arrived hollow on the other side. The technician beside him, Navrik, didn't respond. He was too busy watching the national identity stream fail authentication for the fourth time. Each cycle took longer to load than the last, as if the system itself was hesitating. Heads-up displays on every wall flickered in staggered rhythm. Sen tracked the one nearest his console, where the Dominion emblem had once pulsed in a rhythmic arc. There was now only a rotating glyph reading. Territorial anchor, unknown origin. Try the birth index, Navrik murmured. Maybe we can trace it through civic ancestry records. Sen opened the census shell. Nothing moved. The interface waited for a valid node, then rejected the request. Population index, not validated request failed. Entity status unlinked. He stood slowly, body sluggish, as if gravity had become thicker without warning. The air in the registrar chamber felt unprocessed, not stale, not dirty, just too quiet, like sound itself had lost confidence. Urich scanned the console tower that loomed above them, glowing with mismatched data fragments. A full planetary profile, used to take less than 2 seconds to populate. Now it couldn't build the first line. Restart the grid, Navrik said. Maybe it's the core pathway. Maybe there's a routing fault in the timestamp index. Sen shook his head. I already tried. I rerouted through the back-end logic tree. The buffer doesn't recognize the Dominion's anchor files. It doesn't even know the homeworld exists. Navrik froze. You're saying it can't find Threx Prime. I'm saying the system doesn't acknowledge that such a place was ever mapped. One of the census drones crashed into the north data pillar, then fell to the floor, still spinning, not violently, not even damaged, just lost. No beacon had been assigned, no geographic orientation remained. Sen picked it up and flipped it over. The identifier tag, which once displayed civic subregion codes and assigned territorial origin, now glowed faint red, from null. The word struck harder than impact ever could. He tapped into the live diplomatic node, hoping external systems might confirm the status. The display pulsed once, accepted the query, then loaded an empty screen with a single sentence in Terran code, chrono-sovereign grid, anchor missing. That phrase shouldn't exist. Nothing could operate outside the grid, not transport, not trade, not territory law. Urich turned slowly, eyes falling on the central console. On a whim, he entered his own ID and requested proof of residence. The answer came back instantly. Home location, undocumented. Historical tie, invalid. His name had an address, but the system said the address had never been part of recorded space. Navrik sat down without speaking. For the first time since the directive had activated, the technical staff finally understood what had happened, not in theory, not in language, but in the hollowness of missing maps. Show planetary location render, Urich whispered. The nearest wall display shimmered. A planetary silhouette appeared, a wire-frame dome overlaid with regional markers. Then one by one, the rings of confirmation dissolved, coordinates flickered, settlement hubs blinked out. The planet's core dropped off the model, left behind a shell with no label, a shape with no source. Satellite pings, Navrik asked quietly. Sen responded without turning. Nothing echoes back. There's no historical handshake. Even our own systems don't respond. He stepped to the auxiliary hub and accessed the public transport registry, where every intersystem transit record was supposed to be stored for compliance audits. Each passenger log from the last 2 years ended with the same final line: departed, Threx Prime arrived, unknown source, which meant retroactively, the registry had begun erasing Threx's identity from previous records. Not just the now, the then. Urich's fingertips curled against the edge of the console. What happens when they can't remember where we left from? Navrik didn't reply, but he didn't need to. The answer was already forming in the quiet collapse around them. Urich initiated a terminal-wide diagnostic. He typed slowly, each character like a question to the void. /trace, /system, /index, /origin chain, /Threx Prime. The result took 5 seconds, a delay that felt like eternity. Then no node match found suggested correction. None even the AI refused to guess. There wasn't even enough left to speculate. This wasn't sabotage, Sen muttered. This was a surgical erase. He turned to the nearest biometric lens and scanned his face. The system blinked. The heads-up display shivered, then returned a soft tone. Citizen identity confirmed. Urich Sen Homeworld Association. Not registered citizenship status. Floating entity. Floating, Navrik repeated, stunned. We're detached from planetary status. I'm not tied to anything. No soil, no record, no origin. Uruk leaned back, eyes drifting to the wall, where a commemorative engraving once displayed the Dominion's first planetary survey. It was gone, replaced by a neutral symbol of planetary observation, featureless and gray. How do you defend territory, he whispered, when you don't even have coordinates anymore? He reached for the override command and pinged nearby systems. None responded, not because they were off, because they didn't see the request as coming from anywhere that mattered. One of the communication panels blinked softly, then died. The status bar vanished beneath it. Even the cables behind the walls, themselves engineered with location keys, would soon forget which direction home had been. Navrik rose slowly and stared at the ceiling, lips parted, breath shallow. What if we didn't lose it? He asked. What if the world didn't move? What if the record moved instead? Uruk looked down at the console. The answer was there in its silence. There was nothing left to restore, no backup path, no way to trick the system into remembering. Because forgetting wasn't the failure, it was the weapon, and Earth had fired it without leaving a crater. Status check. Respond immediately, or be replaced. Core Villain's command echoed across the Fleetlink bridge, its authority sharp and absolute, or it should have been. Instead, the laser plasma display ahead of him returned a flicker, followed by an error code so quiet it felt like an insult. Command signature not found, user classification. Pending verification. Villain's brow twitched. He leaned closer to the control altar. Jaw locked, voice low but firm. Override with core military protocol. Security layer turn Vec authority. Rank prime. The interface hesitated. Then, another soft beep. Protocol pathway invalid command stream. Rejected by consensus AI. He didn't step back. Didn't blink. Instead, he struck the base of the console with the side of his fist, causing the external comm chamber lights to flicker once, an old maintenance fault still unresolved on the Torvek's Crown, his flagship. Reroute the command uplink, he barked to the tech officer stationed at the sub-console. Cycle it through warpath latency bypass. Let the core AI reinitialize my voice print. The officer hesitated, not out of fear, but confusion. Sir, there is no recognized signature to initialize. Villain turned. His armor hissed slightly as he moved. Not machine slick, but weight-bearing, real. He stepped forward, looming over the officer. Are you suggesting I've been erased? The man swallowed. I'm saying the system isn't calling you anything at all. Villain turned back toward the interface. Static buzzed across the heads-up display, though no storm lingered outside the Warbridge dome. Designation query. Core Villain result. No historical record. Located suggested reference. Non-associated combatant. His name. Reduced to a red-flagged security tag. No, he said aloud. They can't strip identity through code. He activated the fleet-wide uplink. Rows of vertical glyphs streamed across the tactical board as he pushed his override authorization to every Terran sector warship in orbit. General Core Villain to command grid. Initiate combat readiness. Verification. Silence. Then one by one, fleet ships disappeared from the display, not destroyed, just excluded, unacknowledged. The system didn't show them powering down. It didn't show anything at all. They simply ceased to respond, as though they'd never been part of the Dominion chain of command. The bridge officers whispered among themselves now, their voices hushed, as if afraid the AI itself might listen and decide they were next. Villain raised his voice. Activate Fleet Sovereign Override. Sir, another officer said gently, we can't. The registry no longer contains the sovereign flag. What does it contain? The officer tapped into his console and gestured at the display. The fleet's roster showed no Threx Dominion banner, no warpath rights. The screen didn't show blanks, it showed rejections. Fleet identity, deprecated strategic authority, non-designated core gripped the side rail. Switch to satellite relay. Jump signal to the eastern hold front. The Frey-class destroyers will have retained autonomy. No response. Their signal key returns the same classification, origin unknown. He paced now. The general who had conquered 16 worlds, the man who'd commanded 100,000 ships. His every order now landed like a whisper into fog. He activated his personal channel, one embedded with security redundancy. unique to his genetic marker. Command channel engaged, verifying rank. Error, subject credentials not linked to any known military entity. He stared. The words didn't even blink. They just sat there, still, indifferent. Final. This is a targeted psychological op, he said aloud. Earth couldn't destroy us with weapons, so they erased our command, but they'll need a fail-safe, some way to back down. Find the countermeasure. Another officer approached, holding a slate. His expression was empty, not blank, hollowed. I ran the fail-safe index. Every treaty record is invalid. Every override path leads to neutral arbitration, but the neutral council has already closed our ID. Villain looked at him. The air between them felt heavy, like even breath was resisting identity. You're saying I don't have a chain of command anymore? You don't even have a name in the system, General. He looked down at his gauntlet. His command badge glinted under the heads-up lights. He touched it once. The embedded chip activated. The onboard AI responded, barely above a whisper. Badge protocol query. Current owner identity. Invalid badge reclamation suggested. He tore the badge off and threw it across the room. It clattered against the far console and slid beneath the footrail. He turned back toward the fleet display. All those ships, he muttered, voice colder now. They still exist. I don't need Earth's permission to make them move. But the interface didn't react. The fleet grid showed no registry. The ships were there, physically, but in system terms, they were inert, tools with no wielder, or ghosts. Another message arrived on the main console. Earth Protocol Directive Corin Vale, status active update. All hostile sovereignty references removed from active memory systems. Kor stepped forward, fists clenched. He leaned toward the console as if proximity might re-establish control. I am Dominion, he said softly. I built it. The AI returned a response almost instantly. Dominion not found. That was the final fracture. Not anger now, not pride, just stillness. He turned to the officers on the bridge. Most of them looked down. One stared at the blank wall. Another began removing his rank insignia, not out of rebellion, but futility. Do they even know who we are anymore? Villain asked. An aide replied without meeting his gaze. They've made sure no one does, even us, and so the war never started, because the general who might have led it had been removed from history, not by death, not by defeat, but by erasure. Withdraw the petition, said Dernikov. Not as advice, but decree. This body cannot rule on a claim from a non-entity. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't glance at the delegation seated on the platform's edge, their faces locked between disbelief and forced composure. The Thrix envoy, what remained of it, stood in silence as the Trade Tribunal's ruling chamber pulsed with ambient interface light. Heads-up displays flickered around the periphery, each bound to legal nodes, commerce routes, and treaty pathways, now collapsing in real time. Your Honor, rasped Jack Varn, a logistics attaché from the former Thrix Commerce Authority. We are not requesting new trade designations. We are seeking restoration of prior lanes, all of which are built on an identity that no longer meets threshold requirements for recognition. Halv interrupted, tapping the triangular adjudication slate before him. The room did not echo. The chamber had been engineered for finality, not argument. Every surface was designed to absorb tone, deaden emotion, neutralize sway. The rule of law did not care how a voice sounded, only that it had standing. Varn continued, but the tremor behind his words betrayed him. Surely Earth's activation of this directive cannot supersede centuries of economic participation. Halv's finger traced a line across the display. One by one, trade treaties faded off the screen. Not revoked. Nullified. Treaty ID, V-Thrix 074. Anchor chain invalid. Contract ID 993.88. Cultural sovereign node missing charter status. Frozen. The AI voice confirmed the systemic rejection in tones devoid of bias. System note. All Thrix historical trade authorizations disconnected from chronosovereign ledger. Result, historical presence undefined. Halv looked up. He was a tall man, long-faced, sharp-eyed, unblinking even under tribunal lighting. His robes were a neutral gray, stitched with legal marks in ancient Terran judicial dialect. Not decorative. Binding. You were warned decades ago, he said quietly. About dependency on non-native ledger authorities. Varn swallowed. We were told Earth's memory sovereignty grid was redundancy only, an insurance policy, not a weapon. It became a weapon the moment you forgot you'd handed it the keys. The back row of merchants and systems auditors, representatives from neutral sectors who'd previously profited from Threk's expansion, began checking their terminals. Every node displayed a single pulsing message: Threk's sovereignty. Disconnected economic networks responded faster than military fleets. Several sectors initiated auto shutdowns of existing trade corridors. Third-party merchants began redirecting freight. Exchange rates for Threk's-linked currencies began a freefall on the interstellar commodity slate. Varn tried once more. Our ships are still in transit. Our assets haven't vanished. Surely the tribunal can issue a temporary protection clause. Halv tapped again. Another screen unfurled. A map. Dozens of freighters hovered across neutral lanes. None were receiving docking approvals. Not one registrar accepted their ident code pings. Docking authority, not verified. Source culture not logged. You see, Halv said, with the soft cruelty of fact, this is not a war, it's a conclusion. Varn looked down at his wrist. His own identification band, once embedded with Dominion validation, now blinked a soft yellow, pending authentication. He reached up and touched the back of his neck, where the biotag for government clearance sat dormant. He felt no pulse from it, no heat, as if the body didn't know it was wearing something obsolete. Another tribunal official leaned forward, a minor judge from the Denari Pact, formerly sympathetic to Threk's economic proposals. She asked, gently, is there any clause, any legal bypass, by which the Threks might retain access to at least cultural registry? Halv didn't consult the display. He didn't need to. No. Clause 17 of the Veltarn Accord grants Earth full narrative erasure rights under threat condition. The Dominion signed it. We all did. The mechanism was dormant, until now. The Denari judge leaned back, her shoulders stiff. She tapped her console quietly. No more questions. Halv turned toward the main terminal and entered the final ruling code manually. Not out of ceremony, but responsibility. Final ruling initiated entity. Threk's Dominion status update. Cultural presence. Deprecated legal standing. Void origin record. Expunged. The main tribunal display flashed white. Then it dimmed, slowly, like a heartbeat ending. I hereby confirm, as senior jurist of interstellar treaty law, Halv said, voice unwavering, that no active recognition of the Threk's Dominion remains under galactic regulation. Trade routes are hereby sealed. Contractual engagements are dissolved. All pending claims are denied, effective immediately. He didn't bang a gavel. There was no need. The data slate in front of him, simply locked with a tone like a tomb sealing shut. One of the merchant liaisons stood. We've already rerouted our supply arcs. All credits will be held in escrow until verified transfer nodes can be reassigned. There's nothing left to file. Varn didn't argue, couldn't. He turned around slowly, like a man walking through fog on unfamiliar ground. He'd stepped into this room with a belief that systems could be reasoned with, and left realizing they only ever follow what's written, and Earth had rewritten everything. History listens longer than power ever lasts. Varen Thaw stood alone on the summit floor, his boots quiet against the obsidian tiles. The chamber, once tense, now sterile, held no voices. Only the soft rustle of cloak fabric from distant seats, and the muted flicker of 1,000 heads-up displays no longer showing Threk's banners. Above him, the central spire of the council hall cycled slowly through neutral protocol glyphs. One by one memory glyphs replaced treaties. Not signatures, not threats, just the silent ink of rewritten canon. He waited, not for permission, for stillness, and when the silence settled into something too deep to deny, he spoke. Earth was once forgotten. A few counselors looked up. Most didn't move. They knew what came next. Wasn't negotiation, it was conclusion. We were ignored, sidestepped, measured and found inconsequential. For centuries we were invited to witness, not participate. You allowed us only the role of archivist, thinking that documentation was obedience. You gave us the ledgers to manage, believing that truth could not bite. He moved a single step forward. The earth seal shimmered faintly beneath his feet. But we do not forget. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every syllable was shaped like a carving chisel, meant to leave grooves no noise could erase. You build your empires on declarations. We record them. You sculpt alliances in stone. We ink them in time. You celebrate victories with parades. We encode the reason they mattered. You forget the treaties. We maintain the clause numbers. He paused, looked at no one, looked at everyone. Truth is not shaped by the loudest broadcast. It is carried by what remains after no one is watching. Memory outlasts victory. Memory defines the defeated. Memory preserves the cause when all that's left is ruin. The heads-up display behind him shifted again. This time, not to data, but to one line, repeated across every major channel. Directive Core and Veil executed. Epoch lock finalized. He tilted his head toward the line of delegates seated behind split-glass partitions. You allowed us to keep your stories, and when the time came you violated your own words in front of them. No one interrupted. They couldn't. Even the systems that once facilitated live rebuttals had muted their response grids. Threx channels no longer returned ID signatures. Their name was still spoken, but only as error. Varen reached into his coat and removed a small archive tablet, obsidian-hued, etched with the Earth crest. He laid it on the floor gently, then activated the projection. Above it, a rotating cube of fragmented text appeared. Redacted names, erased deeds, missing charter logs. A single title blinked beneath it. Threx Dominion, entry suspended, origin null. This is not destruction, he said, softly. This is correction. His fingers remained still, but the protocol orb above the council chamber lowered by a fraction, enough to signal that the final archive stamp had been submitted. You threatened a Terran diplomat. You believed our silence meant weakness. You believed our civility was submission. And so we responded. Not with weapons. He tapped the archive tablet once. A second window opened. An interstellar map. Dozens of Threx-linked nodes disconnected simultaneously. Trade rates blinked out. Academic citations dropped references. Ancestral AI paths returned 404. Anchor not found. We responded with consequence. Someone near the back exhaled, but it wasn't exasperation. It was reverence or fear. No soil was burned, no blood spilled, and yet every trace of your lineage is gone. Not hidden, not destroyed, simply unrecognized. He allowed the words to linger, not for emphasis, for gravity. You remain, but your story does not. The air inside the chamber shifted, a strange emotional inversion. No shame, no fury, just the chilling awareness that nothing would fix this, that this wasn't a negotiation gone wrong. It was a universe realigning itself. We didn't alter your history, Varen continued. We revoked the legitimacy of its existence, because memory is not what you recall, it is what others accept. And today no one accepts that you were. He stepped away from the tablet. The map display dissolved behind him, like smoke folding into wind. And so this is not punishment. He turned, facing the central dais one final time. This is not revenge. The lights dimmed. The central display shifted once more. This, he said, is editorial closure. He looked once, just once, toward the council chamber's upper rows, toward those who'd witnessed galactic wars, collapses, re-emergence. They didn't speak, not because they feared Earth's strength, but because they knew nothing they said would be remembered. Not anymore. Earth requires no armies, he whispered. Our truth is the last line. And as he turned to leave, the final protocol flashed across every authenticated ledger node in the room. We have just rewritten yours. Not a verdict, not a threat, an obituary, for a memory that no longer mattered. They're gone, Krelvosik murmured as he stepped into the archival observatory, voice low enough to blend into the artificial twilight filtering through the station dome, and no one remembers they ever mattered. The observatory, nestled in the orbital tier above Dareth Station, overlooked the neutral data spire, a vast lattice of synchronized nodes stretching like silver veins across space. The core memory registry had just completed a universal sweep. Finalization logs pulsed quietly across the edge of Krell's heads-up lens, the glyphs updating in absolute silence. He stood in front of the primary relay terminal, where a deep blue laser plasma display tracked recent ledger shifts. On one side, the galactic cultural map rendered in smooth arcs. On the other, redacted sectors blinked faintly, waiting to stabilize. One by one, void markers replaced familiar labels, re-indexing complete. Threx sector undefined. Entity status deprecated. His fingers hovered over the activation slate, then tapped the command to initiate the closing statement for the registry of memory. A fresh terminal blinked open, reserved for senior historians only. One log, no edits, no recall. Archive entry 19-7, KV final, recorded by Krell Vosik, Earth-verified neutral memory custodian. Let the record reflect the Threx dominion has ceased to exist as a historically acknowledged civilization. No planetary anchors remain, no sovereign treaties survive. Their contributions, failures, and dominion-based claims have been nullified from interstellar continuity. This was not accomplished through war, nor petition, nor attrition. It was enacted by directive, Corin Vale, sealed under Earth's authority, invoked through consent long forgotten by its subjects. He paused, not out of hesitation, out of care. To forget a people is cruelty. To remove their right to be remembered is justice when earned. Krell ended the log. Outside the observation pane, the movement of ships continued as always, supply carriers, research cruisers, diplomatic shuttles, all flowing through a sky that no longer included Threx tags. No one redirected. No one asked why the Dominion wasn't listed in docking queues. The adjustment was already normalized. The ripple had passed. The surface had stilled. He shifted to the Cultural Continuity panel and scrolled through recent amendments. Galactic Charter Clause Update. Article 04 Earth granted permanent conditional authority to validate memory-based sovereignty, nullifications pending Council ratification. The seal beside it wasn't Terran military. It wasn't a flag or an emblem. It was a stylized quill embedded within a closed circle, Earth's Archive Division mark. Varen Thos had submitted that symbol to the Council without flourish. Now it occupied more documents than any war general's name ever had. A quiet notification blinked into Krell's lens, automated Council timestamp confirmation. Final entry posted to the Dominion Treaty Tree, Threx Dominion, historical status, undefined, cultural presence, deprecated. Origin, expunged. No ceremony followed, no alarms, just stillness. And in that void, truth settled like dust upon a sealed book. Krell initiated one final cross-system search for any references still live in the ledger, just in case. Even though he knew better, search query, Threx result, no active entries found. He leaned back slightly, exhaling through clenched teeth. Not relief. Not pride. Something colder. More permanent. Behind him, the reflection in the display caught the faint shimmer of the last Dominion flag being extracted from the cultural thread archives. The flag folded digitally, layer by layer, until it was reduced to a white square with no identifying glyphs. He watched it vanish, and he said nothing. Later, a small entry would appear across interstellar education modules under events of relevance, cultural corrections. It would list three things: the activation of Directive Corin Vale, the termination of Threx recognition, Earth's rise as memory sovereign, nothing else, and that would be enough. Because no one would ask for more. At the far end of the chamber, a set of junior custodians whispered behind their consoles. Krell caught snippets, mentions of economic rebalance, new realignments, fresh trade routes. The void left by Threx was already being reshaped. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. They weren't discussing a loss. They were processing a correction. One of them, a pale-skinned Avenari apprentice, turned to him. Sir, we've finalized the knowledge bank restructure. There's nothing left to cross-link. Should we close the loop for future reference indexing? Krell nodded. Lock the sector. Assign permanent null code. No further inquiry, unless Earth revokes anchor permissions. The boy hesitated. And, if someone eventually asks who the Threx were, Krell gave the kind of look that didn't carry anger, just finality. They won't. A single star chart shimmered into update mode. Across 6 sectors, Dominion link tags disappeared from the grid. Systems re-rendered their routes as if Threx had never touched them. Refugee colonies lost their sponsor markers. Patrol logs rerouted. Even ships built under Threx registry now listed independent origin in the archive. Everything they had built was still there. It simply didn't belong to them anymore. The final ledger screen faded to black. A single confirmation code pulsed at its center. Directive complete. Status irreversible. Krell shut down his station. No farewell ceremony. No applause. Just the cold click of a completed task. Earth had rewritten the galaxy, and the galaxy had accepted it. Not because Earth was feared, but because Earth now owned memory itself. The Threx had challenged a truth keeper, and in return, they'd been forgotten.